Hi everyone, welcome to yet another science class conducted by Manorama Horizon. Today we'll cover the next chapter, that is control and coordination. In the last class we have covered the very first biology chapter, that is life process, and today we are going to cover all the important topics in the chapter control and coordination. So let's start with the chapter. So first we'll discuss the neural coordination in humans. So control and coordination takes place by two different systems. One is the nervous system. Okay, the very first is the nervous system and the second is the chemical system, that is the endocrine system. Okay. So in the nervous system, the coordinations usually take place by electrical impulses and that is done by neurons, brain, spinal cord. Whereas in endocrine system, whereas the chemical system, the coordination takes place by hormones. These are chemical messengers. Hormones are chemical messengers. So first we'll start with the neural coordination, that is controlled by the nervous system. So control by nervous system takes place by a special organ which we call it as neuron. Now let's first see, what do you understand by this image? What do you understand looking at this image? We can see that the boy is feeling like, the boy can feel the taste of the mango, and by just seeing the mangoes in the hand, the boy feel like, means the boy's mouth is watering, right? By just seeing the mangoes. So how this happened? The boy didn't taste the mango, but by just seeing the mango, the mouth started watering. How did this happen? So this happens by the neurons present in a body, okay? So this neurons, when the neurons see the mango, the brain, which is made up of neuron again, signals old images of mango, recalls the taste of mango, and because of that, the mouth start watering, okay? Similarly, if you think about any of the tasty food you like, okay, the very tastiest food, the biryanis or the sweets, okay, if we think, eventually our mouth start watering, and that's because of our nervous system. So let's see the very structural unit of nervous system. We'll start with that, that is the neurons, okay. So this is the structure of a neuron. Now what happens is, a neuron is a structure which receives the signal, transmit the signal, okay. So neurons are interconnected. This is the structure of one neuron. It is connected with another neuron. It reaches till the brain in that way, okay. So one after the other it is connected. So the tip of the neuron, that is here, if we just see, this part of the neuron is known as dendrites, and dendrites are the one that has receptors which receive the signals. For example, if I touch a hot object, so if I am touching a hot object, the dendrites is the one, okay, dendrites are the one that receives that heat, okay, that stimulus, we call it as stimulus. So that stimulus is received by the dendrite. So what does the dendrite do? The dendrite transfer these stimulus to the dendron, these structure, okay, from where the dendrites arises, the branches of dendrites arises, the main structure from where the branches arises, that structure is known as dendron, okay. So dendrite receive the signal, send it to the dendrons. Now what does dendron do? These signals are not very strong, okay. To make this signal strong and to transfer it to other neurons, these dendrons transfer the signal to the cell body, okay. Cell body is a structure that contains the nucleus, okay. In a neuron, cell body is the structure that contains the nucleus. So what does this dendrons do? Dendrons receive the signal from dendrite, transfer it to the cell body. Now in the cell body, the signal gets amplified, okay? The signal gets strong so that the signal can be moved to different neurons and eventually to the brain. So this is what is the function of cell body. So once the signal get amplified, this cell body sends the signal through a long, you can see this is a long projection, okay, sends the signal through a long projection known as axon, okay. So send the signal through the long projection known as axon to the branches that are produced at the tip of axon, okay. So the axons receive the signal from the cell body and then transfer it to the branches where the signal reaches the axon tip, okay, the terminal point of the axon, okay. So this axon tip, we also call it as synaptic knobs, okay. The signal eventually reaches the synaptic knob. Now if you see axon, usually axons are of two types. One, without any covering, you will be finding only the axon, okay, without any covering, and the other is with a covering, okay. Now this axon, you can see it has a covering, okay. So this covering, we call it as myelin sheath, okay. This myelin sheath is made up of fat. This myelin sheath is completely made up of fat. Now what happens because of this is, the axons which are not covered by myelin sheath transfer the signal, but the speed of signal is comparatively low, means the signal speed is comparatively low, which means that the myelin sheath acts as an insulator and increases the speed of the signal transfer, okay. So axon without myelin sheath transfer the signal at a slow pace compared to the axon with myelin sheath. Myelin sheath are made up of fat, okay. Now you might have heard people who are little obese, you might have heard them saying that they feel very hot during summer weather, or they don't feel that much cold in winter weather. Why? Because the fat layer below the body acts as an insulator, okay. It doesn't release any body heat outside. Very less amount of body heat get released. So during summer it's problematic, because during summer what we want, outside the weather is hot, we need to release the heat from our body, right? But during winter it's really good, because during winter what happens? During winter we feel cold and our body wants to keep the heat. It doesn't want to lose the heat. So the same function this myelin sheath does. It is made up of fat. Hence what it does, it helps to trap the heat, okay. So it helps to prevent the loss of the electrical signal. In case of neuron, it helps to prevent the loss of electrical signal. It acts as an insulator, because of which the signal transfer takes place at a very high speed, okay. Now once the signal reaches the axon terminal, or what we call it as synaptic knob, okay, this is known as synaptic knob, okay. Now what happens when it reaches there? Lot of chemical messengers. Now the signal doesn't go by touching the neuron, because between two neurons there is no physical contact. There's a gap between the two neurons, okay. As you can see in this image, here you can see this part is actually shown highlighted here. So this is a axon ending and there's a dendrite, okay. So between the axon end, okay, this is the axon end and this is the dendrite, okay. So between the axon end and the dendrite, there is no physical contact, okay. So what happens? The signals from the axon get released into a gap, okay, this gap which we call it as synaptic cleft, okay, it get released in the synaptic cleft in the form of neurotransmitters, okay, in the form of a chemical called neurotransmitters. So in the form of neurotransmitter, the signals from the axon end get released. So once it gets released in the form of neurotransmitter, where it get released? It get released in the synaptic cleft, okay. So this region is known as synaptic cleft, okay. So it get released in the synaptic cleft. So there in the dendrites, okay, in the dendrites there will be many receptors. You can see here there are many receptors in the dendrites. So that receptors receive this neurotransmitter. So these receptors in the dendrite receive the neurotransmitter, and then again it transfer it to dendron, it goes into the cell body, from the axon again to the axon terminal. So this process take place till when the signal reaches the brain, okay. So this was about the signal transfer. Now let's see another topic, that is the reflex action. So before going into the reflex action, let's understand the process of signal transfer once again. So what happened in signal transfer? We have seen that through the axon terminal, the neurotransmitters, what are released? The neurotransmitters. The neurotransmitters are released into the synaptic cleft, okay. And from there, from the synaptic cleft, the neurotransmitter goes into the dendrites, okay. So this process happens, okay, if I am touching something or if I am touching this pen. So what happens here, from the tip, the stimulus has been received, it get transferred through the neurons to the brain, and then the brain says me ki what I have touched and what should I do with that, okay. Now there are reflex action. Reflex action means the very quick, okay, very sudden reactions that take place is known as reflex action. If I'm touching this pen, I'm not getting any kind of, sudden stimulus. So I'm not reacting or I'm not leaving it suddenly. But there are some certain things where our receptors get activated and then we react all of a sudden. Such kind of reactions are known as reflex actions, okay. Now for example, if you touch a hot object, you can see in this image that a person has touched a prickly plant. A prickly plant has been touched. As soon as the person touched the prickly plant, what does the person do? It just take back, okay, jerk back the hand. That's because the stimulus has taken place, transfer of stimulus has taken place very quickly and there was a quick response. So that kind of action, okay, that kind of quick and sudden actions is known as reflex action, okay. So reflex action happens when we touch a very hot object, or when we are riding a bicycle and there's a dog or someone that has come in front of us, okay, suddenly jumped in front of a cycle, we just apply a brake all of a sudden, right? So that kind of sudden reactions are known as reflex actions, and most of the reflex actions response occurs through the spinal cord, okay. It don't goes to the brain, it just take place with the spinal cord, because that much time of processing is not left, okay. We have to respond it very quickly. So let's see how reflex action takes place, okay. Now if you just see, this is an image of a reflex action. So the arc which is created by this whole reflex action, we call it as reflex arc, okay, reflex arc. So first let's see how it happens. Now I have already said, what was the stimulus here? The stimulus was touching a prickly plant, okay, touching a cactus plant, that was the stimulus. So as soon as the person touched the plant, there's a stimulus received by the receptors, and mostly the receptors are the dendrites. We have seen that the dendrites are the receptors. So when the plant was touched, there was a stimulus generated, and this stimulus was received by the dendrites. Okay, now dendrites of what? Dendrites of sensory neurons. So this is received by the dendrites of sensory neurons. So all the sensory responses are received by sensory neurons. So once the stimulus is generated, sensory neuron receives it and then transport it to the spinal cord. Okay, it goes into the spinal cord. There the spinal cord, what happens? There the reaction, okay, this has been a plant, a prickly plant has been touched. So the response has to be given there. Only then the person can respond. So the spinal cord quickly interchange the message, interrupt the message, and then it just through motor nerve, it sends the response. So what is the response? Response is to take back the hand. So response is not to be sent to the tip of the finger, it has to be sent to the muscles. Only then the muscle will take back the hand. Okay, so during a reflex arc, what happened? First we receive a stimuli. Okay, a stimuli is received. So after receiving a stimuli, what happens? It is received by sensory neurons. Okay, sensory neuron receive the stimuli. This sensory neuron take this stimuli to brain or spinal cord, whichever is the nearest. It takes the stimuli to the brain or the spinal cord. So here inside the brain and the spinal cord, there are interneurons. Okay, interneuron, that is, it function both as, you know, sensory and motor neurons. So this interneurons interrupt the message, understand what has to be done. It just send the message back, not through the sensory neuron. Sensory neuron will not take back the message. So who will take back the message? The message is then taken back by the motor neuron. Okay, so who takes back the message? The message or the response is taken by the motor neuron. So once the motor neuron take back the image, where does it take? It takes to the effector organ. Whatever is the effector organ, it takes to the effector organ. Okay, the message is taken to the effector organ. Now you all have to understand that effector organ is not always the same as the one which has received the stimuli. Remember the first picture? What was the first picture there? The boy has seen a mango, the mouth started watering, right? So from where did the stimulus has been taken place in the body? Okay, so the stimulus has been received by the eye, right? The stimulus has been received by the eye. The boy has seen the mango through the eye. So stimulus was from the eye, but the response was in eye? No, the response was in mouth. Okay, the mouth started watering. So effector will be different, means not always, but many of the time effectors are different from where the stimulus is received. Okay, so this arc is known as reflex arc. Okay, so is it clear? Now let's solve a question here. Now you can see sensory nerve of a reflex arc. Sensory nerve of a reflex arc carries information from the receptor cell to the where does it carries? To the spinal cord, brain, muscles of the effector organs, or bones of the receptor organ. Where does it carries? It carries to the spinal cord. Okay, that is what we have read now. While seeing the reflex arc, we have seen that how the sensory nerve carries the impulses to the spinal cord. Okay. Now let's see the parts of the nervous system. Okay, the parts of the central nervous system. Now central nervous system, it has two parts. Okay, one is the brain. Central nervous system has two parts. One is the brain and the other one is the spinal cord. Okay, spinal cord. So the central nervous system has two parts. Okay, basically it has two parts. One is the brain, which is situated inside the skull, a protective covering skull, and the other one is the spinal cord, which is situated inside the vertebral column. Okay, so both are protected, both are very important, both are very delicate, hence both are protected by bony covering called skull and vertebral column. Okay, so let's see now the structure of our brain. Okay, so let's see the parts of the brain, what are the different parts and what are the functions of this different parts. So our brain is basically divided into three major parts. Okay, one is the forebrain, next is the midbrain, and the another is hindbrain. So let's first see the forebrain. Okay, now forebrain is the biggest part, we can say. It covers the most part of the brain. Okay, forebrain. So forebrain, it has the first part of the forebrain is this big part of the brain. Okay, this big part of the brain, that is the cerebrum. We know that cerebrum has two hemispheres, the right hemisphere, the left hemisphere. These hemispheres are more convoluted. Okay, there are many foldings. You can see here a lot of convolutions can be seen. And this makes up the most part of the brain. Okay, the largest part of the brain, that is the cerebrum. Cerebrum functions mainly means all the voluntary functions. Okay, whether I should lift this pen up or not, whether I should walk or not, these things are done by cerebrum. Okay, vision, control of all sensory things, thinking, memory, everything is controlled by cerebrum. Okay, cerebrum mostly does all the voluntary work, whatever voluntary work. Now if I want to lift this pen up or I should keep it down, this is also decided by cerebrum. Okay, so cerebrum decides all the voluntary, controls all the voluntary activities. Apart from cerebrum, forebrain also contains another part which is here, that is thalamus. So thalamus acts as a relay center. Thalamus acts as a relay center. So whenever a message comes about vision or something, it doesn't go directly to the cerebrum. First it's come to the thalamus, and thalamus is the one, okay, you need to go to this part of the cerebrum or you have to go to that part of the cerebrum. So that kind of sending the signals to different part is done by thalamus. Hence we call thalamus as the relay center of the brain. Okay, now below that, below thalamus, you will be finding hypothalamus. Hypo means what? Below, right? Hyper means above and hypo means below. So hypothalamus, just below the thalamus, you will be finding hypothalamus. Hypothalamus controls hunger, thirst. Okay, in our body, all this hunger, whenever you feel hungry or whenever you feel thirst, you will get to know only because of this hypothalamus. So mostly those things. Also this hypothalamus secretes many hormones which controls the secretion of pituitary glands. Okay, so this was about the forebrain. Now let's move on to the midbrain and the hindbrain. Midbrain and the hindbrain does more or less, similar function, that is the control of involuntary actions. Okay, control of involuntary actions are done by midbrain and the hindbrain. Okay, all the involuntary actions are controlled by this part. If you see, hindbrain contains the second largest part of the brain, that is the cerebellum. Okay, cerebellum is the second largest part of the brain. Now cerebellum, the interesting thing about cerebellum is it controls balancing, it gives balancing to the body. So whenever you might have seen a drunk person, right? How does a drunk person walk? In a very zigzag manner, right? So what happens when a person gets drunk is the activity of cerebellum get hampered. Okay, the functioning of cerebellum get hampered. So when this cerebellum functioning get hampered, the person start to lose its balance. Okay, because of that, when a person drink, you will not see that a person is walking in a straight line. It's because the cerebellum, which control the balance, is affected. Okay. Apart from that, we have medulla oblongata as well as pons that control the involuntary activities. If you see medulla oblongata, it controls many important involuntary activities such as heartbeats, respiration rates, etc. Okay, and pons also, along with medulla oblongata, controls the respiratory rate. Okay, so hence the major function of midbrain and hindbrain is to control all the involuntary activities. Okay, so we have seen that the brain can be divided into forebrain, midbrain and hindbrain. Forebrain controls all the voluntary activities and midbrain and hindbrain controls all the involuntary activities. Okay, so you might get a question that what are the different parts of a brain and what are the functions. So you have to clearly write the function of forebrain and the function of hindbrain. Don't miss out to write the function of cerebellum, thalamus, hypothalamus, cerebellum, medulla oblongata. Okay. Now let's see another important thing, that is meninges. You all might have heard about meninges, right? Whenever you hear about brain, this very important part of the brain that is being discussed always is meninges. Meninges are the protective covering seen on top of the brain. Okay, on top of the brain, here you can see in blue color, it has been shown. This meninges are the protecting covering seen on top of the brain. Now these meninges are 3-layered thick. Okay, they are 3-layered thick. Okay, you can see dura mater on top, then arachnoid, and then the pia mater, very thin pia mater. Okay, so this 3 layers make up the meninges, and between these 3 layers, so there are 3 layers. First, outer is the dura mater, okay, which you will be studying in your higher grades. You don't have to study in this grade, but you have to just know that there's 3 layers that protect the brain, and this 3 layer together we call it as meninges. Okay. Now in between these layers, there is a liquid flowing. Okay. So there are fluids flowing in this layer, and this fluid is known as what we name it as cerebrospinal, cerebrospinal fluid, CSF. This is the fluid that is present inside this layer of meninges, and this helps to absorb the shock. It acts as a shock absorbent. Apart from this covering, we have the heart covering the skull. So this is about the meninges. Meninges You may get a 1-mark question. Okay, here you may get a 1-mark question. Ki, what is the role of meninges? What is the function of meninges? Or name the fluid seen inside the layers of meninges. Okay, at that time you need to mention it is as cerebrospinal fluid. Okay, now, so this was about the structure of the brain. So we have seen that the brain is divided into 3 main parts, that is forebrain, midbrain and hindbrain. Okay, accordingly the functions are also divided, and the brain is covered by a protective covering which we call it as meninges, and between the layer of meninges there is a special fluid that provides shock absorption to the brain, and that fluid is cerebrospinal fluid. Okay, now next we'll move on to the chemical coordination in humans. We have seen the neural coordination, how neurons receive signal, what are the parts of neurons, what are the parts of brain, what are the function of different parts of brain. These things and all we have very quickly covered. Okay, all the important topics. Now the important topics are chemical coordination in humans. Okay, so chemical coordination, as I told you, it is the coordination by hormones. Okay, it is the coordination by hormones. Okay, so here in chemical coordination, the coordination takes place by hormones, and these hormones are secreted by glands known as endocrine gland. Okay, so which glands secrete these hormones? These hormones are secreted by endocrine glands. Endocrine glands, you can also call it as ductless gland. Ductless glands means these glands will secrete their secretion, but there is no ducts to carry this secretion to the target organs. Okay, there are no ducts here. So what this glands does is, they just secrete the secretions, they just secrete it directly inside the blood, and blood is the one which carries this to the different organs. Okay, wherever target place, wherever the hormone has to work, so it carries there. Now let's see the different endocrine glands. Okay, so the first endocrine gland that we are, okay, so these are the different endocrine gland you can see here. Studying our pituitary glands, thyroid gland. Okay, then we'll study about pancreas, adrenal gland, ovaries and testes. So these are the different glands today we'll study. Okay, and we'll see the important hormones which are secreted by these glands. Okay, so let's start with the very first gland, that is the pituitary gland. Now if you see pituitary gland, where is it located? In the structure of brain, I have told that hypothalamus acts on the secretion of pituitary gland, right? So pituitary gland is located just below the hypothalamus. It's very small. It's just a pea-shaped, a pea-sized gland. Okay. So this pituitary gland, it is located just below hypothalamus. Okay. In the brain, it is located just below hypothalamus. Okay. Now, what is the function? There's a lot of function taking place in pituitary gland. If you just see the structure of pituitary gland, so the pituitary gland has 2 lobes, the anterior lobe and the posterior lobe. Now, if you see the anterior lobe, it secretes lot amount of hormones. Okay, so they are TSH, that is thyroid stimulating hormone. It stimulates the thyroid gland to secrete its secretion. ACTH, that is adenocorticotropic hormone, that is it stimulates the adrenal gland to secrete the secretion. Then it is LH, that is luteinizing hormone. FSH, that is follicle stimulating hormone. So these are the hormones secreted by the adrenal pituitary gland, anterior pituitary gland, and there's a posterior pituitary gland. It secretes 2 hormones. One is vasopressin, which controls the urination, okay, in our body, when we feel the urge of urination, how many times, okay, all these are controlled by vasopressin, and one more hormone, that is oxytocin. So The posterior pituitary gland secrete two hormones, that is vasopressin and oxytocin, whereas the anterior pituitary gland secretes TSH, ACTH, LH and FSH. Okay. Now let's see the other gland, that is the thyroid gland. Now thyroid gland, if you see, thyroid gland, where is it located? It is located near our throat, that is the voice, wherever our voice box is there, okay, near the larynx, it is located there. The thyroid gland is located there. And what is the function? The function is to control the metabolic rate of the body. It controls the metabolic rate of the body. Also, it helps to regulate the level of calcium in the body, okay. So, it is present near the voice box, okay, in the throat, and then the function is to regulate all the metabolic activities, okay. Next thing, that is the adrenal gland. Adrenal gland, if you see, adrenal gland is like a kidney cap, okay. It is situated on top of the kidney, okay. Adrenal gland has two parts. One is adrenal medulla and the other one is adrenal cortex. So, the upper one is the cortex and the inner one is the medulla. Now, the important hormone, there are many hormones secreted by this adrenal gland. But the important hormone which we are going to study in 10th grade is the adrenaline. Okay, the important hormone which we are going to study is adrenaline. Adrenaline is the important hormone. This hormone is secreted when some emotional urge happen in us. Okay, this hormone gets secreted. Hence, this hormone is known as the fight or flight hormone. Either you fight or you flight. Okay, if you see a snake, in front of yourself, or if you just see a tiger or any dangerous thing, or if you feel very happy, these hormones get secreted. Okay, this adrenaline get secreted. So because of that, if you are just seeing a snake in front of you, what happens? Your heartbeat rises, your respiratory rate increases, the mouth, that is the throat, get dried. Okay, so these kind of reaction which take place inside our body, it's because of this adrenaline. Okay, so it's because of adrenaline. Hence, adrenaline is known as fight or flight hormone. Fight or flight hormone, whether you fight in that condition or just you run. Okay, it is also known as emergency hormone. It gets secreted during emergency conditions. Okay, now let's see the other hormone, the other gland and the secretion of that gland. Okay, that is pancreas. Pancreas, we have already seen in last class that pancreas help to secrete lot of enzymes. Okay, apart from that, pancreas also act as an endocrine gland. Okay, it is situated below the stomach. Okay, pancreas is situated below the stomach, and the function of pancreas, it's secrete two important hormones. One is insulin and the other one is glucagon. Insulin, what does it do? It reduces the blood sugar level. Okay, whenever the blood sugar level increases, insulin helps to reduce it, and glucagon, just opposite to insulin, it helps to increase the blood sugar level. Okay, so this was about the function of pancreas. Next we have two gonads, okay, male gonad and female gonad. Male gonad is the testis. Okay, testis is situated, where it is situated? Below the abdomen. It is situated in the scrotal sac below the abdomen. And what is its function? It helps to secrete sperms, we know. But apart from that, it helps to secrete the hormone, that is male sex hormone testosterone. Okay, it helps to secrete the male sex hormone known as testosterone. Okay, testosterone stimulates the testis to secrete more and more, or to produce more and more sperms. Okay, So this was about the male gonad, testis. Apart from that, we have to learn about the female gonad, that is ovaries. Okay. So ovary, you can see a pair of ovary can be seen on either side. There is one ovary. The location, similarly, location is below the abdomen, and the function here, ovary also secrete hormones, okay, sex hormones, and it secretes two different hormones, estrogen and progesterone. Okay, so two hormones, one is estrogen and the other one is progesterone. Okay, so it secretes estrogen and progesterone. So these are the two hormones it secrete. Okay, and these two hormones helps in the process of ovulation. Okay, so these are the different hormones that are secreted by different endocrine glands in our body. Now, this was about the endocrine glands and the neural coordination which we have studied in humans. Now, let's see in plants. Okay, what are the different coordination in plants? Now, in case of humans, we have seen that transmission or the coordination takes place by neural system and chemical system. Okay, in plants, there is a chemical system where the plants also produce lot of hormones, and lot of activities in plants take place by those hormones. So we'll see that. So first we'll see coordination in plants. First we are going to see the different types of movements in plants. Okay, the different types of movements in plants. So we'll see the different types of movement in plant. Okay, so the first movement in plant is geotropism. Geotropism, moving towards the earth, towards the gravity. Okay, that is known as geotropism, and geotropism is shown by roots. Okay, so who shows geotropism? Geotropism is shown by roots. Roots, you might have seen, roots always tend to grow below, okay, below the earth. It grows towards the gravity. That is known as geotropism. The next type of movement is phototropism. Phototropism is towards light, and this can be seen in stems. Okay, stems shows growth towards light. Okay, it just grow towards light. Wherever there's light source, the stem will grow towards light. Okay, if you keep a plant just in front of a window pane or something, the plant will not grow towards your room. The plant will grow outside, towards outside the room where there is light source. Okay, that kind of growth we call it as phototropism, and the meaning of photo we have already read in our last class. Okay, now let's see the other movements. Okay, so hydrotropism. Again, this is seen in roots. What do? They move towards the water. Okay, hydrotropism means movement towards the water. That is known as, hydro means water. So movement towards water is known as hydrotropism. As you can see in this image, wherever we keep a plant, the root always tends to go towards the water so that it can absorb the water. Okay, next is the chemotropism. Chemotropism means movement towards a certain chemical, and that is most commonly seen in pollen grain. Pollen grain, whenever they fall on top of stigma, the pollen tube grows towards the chemical secreted by the stigma. Okay, and then we have tigmotropism. Tigmotropism is the movement by touch. Okay, you would have seen in touch me not plant, that plant itself says don't touch me. Okay, so in that touch me not plant, what happens? When we just touch the plant leaf droop, the plant's leaf fold, okay, inwards. Okay, so that kind of movement where it responds to touch, it's known as tigmotropic movement. Okay, so these are the different kinds of movements in plants. So what are the different kinds of movements we have seen? One is phototropism, another one is geotropism, then we have seen hydrotropism, chemotropism and tigmotropism. Okay, So movement by contact, movement by touch, okay. So that is known as stigmotropic movement. Now next we'll study about the hormones in plants. As I told you that there are different types of hormones in plants. So hormones in plants. So the first hormone which we'll study is auxin. Auxin was the first hormone discovered, and auxin has a lot of functions, you know. Auxins are usually seen on tips of stem and tips of root, tips of branches, okay. So this helps in the elongation process, okay. You can see synthesized at the shoot tips, okay. They are synthesized at the tips, whether it is shoot tip, root tip, okay. They are always synthesized on the tips, and they help the cells to grow longer, okay. So this auxin, what does auxin does? Auxin helps the cells to grow longer, okay. If you have this amount, this size of cell, when auxin is supplied, the size of cell increases, okay. The elongation of cell is the function of auxin, okay. Now apart from that, auxin, usually what happens, whenever light is there, auxin goes towards opposite to light, okay. For example, if here there is a sun, okay, so here the sun is present, okay, so the sunlight, and here there is a shoot. So sunlight is falling directly on the shoot. Where does the auxin go? The auxin will move on to the opposite side of the shoot, okay, just goes into the shady area. Now what does auxin does? Auxin does cell elongation. Because of this, the cell elongates on the shady region, okay. Shady region, the cell elongate, and the plant seem to be bending towards the light, okay. Now helps in longer cell growth in darker areas of the plant, as we have seen here how it helps, okay. Now the next hormone is cytokinin. What is the function of cytokinin? The function of cytokinin is to promote cell division, okay. Here auxin, what auxin does? Auxin is elongating the cell. It's not dividing the cell, but what cytokinin does? Cytokinin divides the cell. Now this is a single cell. What does cytokinin does? Cytokinin helps to divide it into two or more than that, okay. So cytokinin helps in the division of cell. Now next one is gibberellins. Gibberellins helps in, most importantly, it is known as helping in germination. So germination, because it helps in germination, means it helps in the growth of the stem, okay. A seed stem grows, okay, and then it germinates. So it helps in the growth of stem. That is what gibberellin does. It helps in the growth of stem. Then comes the abscisic acid. Abscisic acid, here we have read about auxin, cytokinin, gibberellin. They all are promoters. Abscisic acid is not a promoter, okay. There should be someone negative also, right? Everything happening positive means someone should be there to halt that, okay, to inhibit that reaction, and that is known as, that hormone is actually abscisic acid. It is also known as the inhibitor, okay. So what does it do? It inhibits the plant growth, okay. It inhibits the plant growth. Now whatever cytokinin is doing, whatever gibberellin is doing, just opposite to that this abscisic acid does. It inhibits the growth of the plant, okay. Now what happens? It helps in the wilting of leaf. This hormone, don't think that it's a villain because it's inhibiting the growth. No, it's not. It helps plant during stress condition. Just imagine that the plants in desert, okay, if they are growing too much, they cannot survive longer, right? Because the availability of water or different resources will be very less. So at that time, this abscisic acid plays a very important role, because what does this abscisic acid do? Whenever there is limitation of any of the resource, the abscisic acid reduces the growth, start the leaves to wilt, okay. Because of that, what happens? What happens because of that? The plant will survive in the stress condition. So all these hormones helps in plant, okay. So these are the different types of plant hormones. Now let's solve a few questions related to the plant hormone. Okay. So the first question here is, what are plant hormones? What are plant hormones? Okay, plant hormones are chemicals, okay, that are secreted by different parts of the plants. And why it is secreted? It's secreted for the growth of the plant, for germination, for cell division, okay. So they are chemicals, okay, that are secreted by the plants, okay, that is known as plant hormones. Now name the plant hormone responsible for the following. Growth of the stem. Which hormone is responsible for growth of stem? Just now we have seen it is gibberellin, okay. Then promotion of cell division. Here it is not cell elongation, it is cell division. Cell division is promoted by cytokinin, okay. Then we have inhibition of growth. We have seen only one hormone in the four inhibits the growth, and that is abscisic acid. And then elongation of cell. Elongation of cell also we have seen, it is by auxin, okay. So these, all the four hormones function has been asked here, okay. Now next, name a plant hormone responsible for bending of a shoot of a plant. We have already seen which hormone helps in the bending of shoot. We have seen during sunlight what happens. There's a hormone that tend to move to the shady region away from the sunlight, and that hormone causes the bending, okay. That hormone causes the bending. And which hormone moves away from the sunlight? That hormone is known as auxin, okay. Auxin moves away from the sunlight and causes bending. How does it promote phototropism? It promotes phototropism because the plant tend to bend towards the light, as we have seen, because as the hormones are moving towards the shady region or the darker region, the cells in these darker region get elongated, okay. So the cells in this darker region get elongated. Because of that, the plant, the shorter side bends, okay. Because of that, the shorter side bend, and it seems that the plant is moving towards the light, okay. So this was about the chapter. I hope you understood the different types of coordination taking place in humans and taking place in plants. So we have seen the neural coordination in human, we have seen the chemical coordination in human, and then we have seen the different movements in plant and the different hormones in plant. So whatever topic that has been discussed today are the important topics, okay. These are the important topics, okay. Let's wind up the class now. So any queries you can leave it in the chat box. We'll try to solve all the queries that are being asked. Thank you.
Manorama Horizon. Learning made simple.